Have a desire to take your conversation to its highest potential? If you do, hop on over to my website and check out the School of Reform. Yes, school is most definitely in. Knowing Bible is the course that I am now offering to take your conversation to its next level. Grow closer not simply with the philosophy that is within the Bible, grow closer not simply with the devotional character of the living God, but grow closer with yourself also. So head on over to my website, check out the School of Reform, and check out Knowing Bible. This is the course for the learner that wants to make their life, both personal and devotional, more full. Good morning and happy Tuesday. Thank you all for tuning in and for continuing to tune in. Welcome, if you are here for the first time, to the channel. And I will immediately continue the thought from last week because it has been on my mind. And this subject, touching on my main show, Justification, of creation, and of creation through being able to be teachable, being able to be a learner, from being able to embrace the void and the feeling of nothingness. And as we've been saying, emptiness. And I think it comes down to lifestyle, because we can live our life and go through different experiences, and depending on where we are and how those experiences impact us, we can actually realize that this living experience isn't living up to what we thought it was. And I can remember my own self at what I like to call a quarter life crisis. Got the midlife crisis, but hopefully it catches you a little bit earlier. Quarter life crisis, and hopefully it catches somebody else earlier than that. But realizing that the societal point of view in terms of lifestyle isn't something that is personally or inwardly suitable, because that's just not you. And so what do you do with that? You take time to understand who you are. You take time to understand where you envision yourself going. And if you're lucky, you find yourself a guide. And if you're even luckier than that, you find yourself a guide that is not human. And I'm talking about the words or the philosophy that is within the scriptures, of which I was lucky enough to come across. And taking that and realizing that what I was reading was higher than myself. What I was experiencing was an experience that had been experienced by many people over a vast period of time that the Bible covers, and then realizing that I needed to shut up. And shutting up, I then became empty. And that emptiness, for a transition, just as we've been saying this entire time, becoming empty for that transition of being, and that transition of being for state of mind, and that state of mind for realizing that there is physical world, there is mental world, and then there is inward world. So we beings that are human are going through an experience where a number of instances and worlds are collecting and colliding and are leading into something that, as we're going through it, we have absolutely no idea what we're going through. And so we have to sort these things out on the fly. And sorting these things out on the fly, it gives us wisdom. And it's that wisdom that we can take and that we can exercise for experimenting more with it so that our thoughts no longer remain quote unquote grounded, but our thoughts now can rise above. They can now rise above the ground that we are and have. And taking this concept of the rising above, you learn that you are to be, well, you hear, I'll just say this first. You hear that you are to be in the world, yet not of the world. Now, that's the traditional scope. In the world, yet not of the world. But for me, and from everything that I've experienced putting into practice the things that are within the Bible and its philosophy, I'm learning that you are to be of the world, yet not in the world. It's a reverse. And I find that so interesting because everything that exists, you think life should be the way that it is, but it actually isn't. You think that reality should be what it is, but reality is seemingly more fiction than fiction. And so it's really not that we're supposed to be in the world and not of the world. We are to be of the world and not in the world. The first context that we're traditionally used to hearing, in the world and not of the world, is a traditional religious context, and it's held secularly. So it's traditionally religious for the human being. To be of the world and not in the world is the reverse of that. It's devotional in the sense of wanting the human being to excel or to transcend where it is. So the scope, just as we should expect, is different. And the last time we were here, world was brought up. And this term world is not a literal world. In the Bible, world actually means synagogue, church, denomination, all three of these things all meaning the same thing, religion. So world in the Bible means the religious world. That's the only primary or firstly world that matters to the Bible because the Bible is not a secular book and shouldn't be treated as such. And it's not written in a secular sense. In its context, evades that secular connotation. Initially or primarily. Secondarily is another story, but initially, primarily, world in the Bible, religious world. I ever spoke in the world. I went into the synagogue where the Jews resort, is what the man said when he was being accosted by the Sanhedrin about his doctrine. So this word world, it's connected to synagogue, it's connected to the place where the Jews resort, church, denomination. So the real context behind that saying, of the world, not in the world, that world, religious world, and the one that spoke this is the one that advocated for this. They are not of the world as I am not of the world. This individual preached a really different philosophy than what his historians or his authors have sectioned out for him to say. So there's an actual man, and then there is the man created, fictionized, if that's even another word. I stay creating words. If that's even a word. So there's a fictionized individual, but then there's a real man. The real man was not of the world. And when we hear that now in that context, we think another worldly individual gone and then came down into a human body. And well, that's really not what the initial philosophy was, as started by Paul. And that's really not even prior to Paul, the actual man himself, what he taught. This is a proverb. They are not of the world, for I am not of the world. And that proverb is really relating to my mind is in no way related to the religious world. My heart is in no way in tune to the religious world. My experience is no way related to the religious world. And everyone that I have chosen is just like I am. Their experience is above. And that is, again, a psalm. Forever thy word, O Lord, is in heaven. And in the Bible, much symbolism in this book. Heaven is a connotation or means sanctuary, or sanctuaries, plural, because there are two rooms. The holy and the most holy as Moses created from the pattern that he saw. And that same pattern that he saw has to exist above because he said that he saw it from above. And so when the man taught, he's from above, not literally, as we would frame his mind, where his conversation was. As Paul says in Philippians, our conversation is in heaven. This is all, figurative language, and language pointing to the conversation transcending the religious world and resurrecting upwards. The same illustration that is painted of the man dying, rising, and ascending, and then receiving a new ordained experience. Same thing for us, and that's what was meant by hereafter you will see angels ascending and descending from heaven to earth. It's the same thing. It's not literal. The rising above is the experience transcending the world, as he says. And that's what this experience is about. And that's what the man taught. That which is of the flesh is flesh, that which is of the spirit is spirit. The man's philosophy created a division between what should be experienced and what shouldn't. Hereafter, the true worshiper should worship the Father in spirit and in truth. The kingdom of God is within you. All of these quotes pointing to the experience transcending the quote-unquote world. And when we're going through what we're going through, we can't just hold it to a secular sense or to a physical sense, because we're not simply secular physical people. Prior to this state, a spark had to enter into our organism to give it life. So that spark also has a character within us and also has an experience that it needs to experience. And when we and our spark are in conflict, not agreeing, that's when life starts to get a little bit difficult because of being pulled in two different ways. The society outside of us, society within us. So we have to make a stance. And I brought up that experience of mine, the quarter life crisis, because it was a time of stance. It was a time of deciding in what way I would choose. But I continued to choose the society that I knew was not me and that was actually frustrating me? Or would I choose the society that was above? The society that you gain yourself to contribute yourself to that society that you dislike so much, but now in a more beneficial and holistic way. That's why I chose the latter, and that's the experience of the human. The deception of the secular world is the same deception of the spiritual world. Same deception of the secular world, spiritual / religious / philosophy. Same deception. Has to come a point in time where both we, physically or mentally, and then we, in the sense of our conversations, thoughts, and feelings, say, I am not going to be of this, despite the fact that I must be in it. And to be not of it means to enter into a classroom where transition is taking place to where you can now become industrious. You can now know your industry to be in the world. And that's the difference. It's service. The entire point is service. That's why he says they shall know that you are my disciples based on how you love one another. So that's the end goal. The highest rung on that ladder is is love or charity or benevolence. But it starts from acknowledging and consenting to the experience of not being of the world. Not being of, you have yourself the opportunity to gain understanding of who you are, to then go back in and benefit. It's a continual circle that it just goes back again to the illustration. Hereafter you will see angels ascending and descending from heaven to earth. That ascending upwards is are individuals whose minds are going up for an education, but they're not remaining up. They don't remain up there, they come back down. So they take what they've learned and they've come back down. They take what they learned, once they're down, they go back up, refine their education, then they come back down. Continual process, and the illustration is figurative, showing the movement that the individual has when they're in this classroom concerning creation, transition, concerning personal, devotional growth and development, and cannot get away from this word concerning justification. Because literally, that's what the concept of justification is: cleansing. The conversation has to be cleansed. And I like to put this in its right context because, again, the Bible is a book of spiritual, religious, philosophical correction, primarily or firstly. To put the correction in a human context, primarily or firstly, is wrong to do, which is why many of the new translations of the Bible are more human sounding, because the connotation is human experience first for a religious or spiritual experience, and that's just a deception. The initial point of the Bible is for the conscience of the conversation first, because this is what was actually placed into us initially for our organism to work. And so what is within us has to return to its creator. And what the Bible articulates is that experience of what is within returning to the creator. And so it's that return that actually affects our human being. Because when our human being can retain and observe the experience of our conversation, the body without a body, going through what it's going through, our human being will take in wisdom, will receive education, will be re-educated, and will take what it needs to take and to apply it to itself for a better outcome, for a better lifestyle. This, separating from what we know from Christianity and the many forms of it leading up to its official point by Constantine, and then what we now know for today, the initial point that Paul was bringing out in his letters to the Colossians, the Corinthians, the Thessalonians, the Philippians, to the Ephesians, to the Romans, was about lifestyle. Paul taught a specific lifestyle for a specific group of people who had the privilege of entering into a new Eden sectioned out for individuals that wanted to maintain that lifestyle. And that lifestyle that lifestyle to Paul was the lifestyle of the virtuous sufferer, the virtuous sufferer. Why so often he likes to talk about, I will glory in my infirmities. Yea, so as much as Christ is in me, to live is to die, and to die is to gain. So much of this Paul is putting into place because he's actually giving birth. This isn't what we know today, but he's actually giving birth to a new philosophical, Stoic, Cynic type relationship with the scriptures. And it's based off of lifestyle. And that lifestyle, hinting at, as he says into the Ephesians and also to the Romans, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And prior to saying that, he says, be not conformed to the world. And to the Ephesians, he says, be renewed in the spirit of your mind, prior to saying that, he says, put off your former conversation. So Paul's initial point of view, which is again something that we have today gotten far away from, is the lifestyle of shedding the skin of former belief and of former thought processes of approaching, to allowing our mind to be renewed from that old former stance to let the Creator work. To let the Creator work. And that's what justification is. Allowing the Creator to work so that the human being, seeing and taking knowledge of the work that the Creator is doing within the conversation, to be able to cultivate a lifestyle that meshes with the individual person, that meshes with the talent and the skills blessed to the individual person, and that meshes all of that together with the living God's devotional character. So it's a pretty interesting transition from when you take into consideration Moses, where you had to do a ritual, baptisms and such, to be just in the eyes of the Creator. That no longer being necessary because it was temporary, and then transitioning to the experience of creation inwardly. So returning to the absolute point of what Eden failed to, articulate. Now we have the experiences to know what is right and to know what is not right, and to put those into practice, and to resume the creation that was supposed to take place within initially. And so, as always, I leave you with whatever you go through from this time forward and this week on. Think about it as creation and renewal inwardly. Take care for now. Have a desire to take your conversation to its highest potential? If you do, hop on over to my website and check out the School of Reform. Yes, school is most definitely in. Knowing Bible is the course that I am now offering to take your conversation to its next level. Grow closer not simply with the philosophy that is within the Bible, grow closer not simply with the devotional character of the living God, but grow closer with yourself also. So head on over to my website, check out the School of Reform, and check out Knowing Bible. This is a course for the learner that wants to make their life, both personal and devotional, more full.